James Price. I'm the communications lead for the 5G Rural Dorset project. Welcome to our talk as part of Digital Leaders Week, entitled Helping to Create the Digital Leaders of Tomorrow. One other bit of housekeeping I've forgotten as well. We're running a panel session about halfway through this session, so if you wouldn't mind turning your cameras off for that, then we get all of the panel nicely assembled across the screen. It looks pretty good. So this session is two things really. It's an update about how we're progressing with the project, the milestones we've reached and the use cases we're developing that will benefit those living and working in Dorset, as well as the over 1 million visitors that come to the area every year. But this session is also about the future. So right from the outset, the project and its use cases were designed with people at its heart. How could we make Dorset a better place to live, work and visit using 5G? What use cases for 5G could we develop that would improve public safety? And how could we use technology to improve productivity and benefit the communities at large? We were also very keen to ensure that we were helping to build a legacy and inspire the digital leaders of tomorrow with real-world projects, providing opportunities and skills. So that is where our session will focus and will lead you today. We will be introducing a panel of students and young people that are working with us on the research areas and learning about what opportunities and skills they are developing that will hopefully last them a lifetime and encourage them in their careers. We strongly believe that this is a crucial part of any research project, and it really is woven into the development of the project use cases, as you will hear in a bit. But first, I'd like to hand over to Colin Wood, Programme Manager for 5G Rural Dorset, for an overview of the research that we're doing and the development of the project. Thanks, Colin.
Thanks, James. And can you see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. I've turned my camera off. I hope you don't mind. My slides are a lot better looking than I am, but my bandwidth probably won't cope with both. So as James says, thank you. My name's Colin Wood. I work in the Digital Place team at Dorset Council, and I oversee all our work around wireless connectivity. I'm just going to give a short overview of 5G Rural Dorset before we hear how the project's working with young people to provide hopefully what we think is a range of exciting skills and learning opportunities. And as the title of the talk says, hopefully helping create the digital leaders of tomorrow. But I'm aware this is probably a general audience, so I thought I'd better spend 1 minute just explaining what 5G is. 5G is the 5th generation of cellular technologies. But unlike previous Gs, it's not really about the latest handsets, although it will provide incredibly fast mobile connectivity. 5G as a term covers a range of things offering specific capabilities. So that includes latency, the lag between a signal being sent by one machine and received by another that can be so low as to make autonomous vehicles a realistic possibility for the first time. But it's probably the ability to connect many more devices to a single network and then to slice that network up for multiple purposes, which makes 5G really exciting for delivering services in a rural location like ours. So because in an area like with relatively few people, networks that support many different social and industrial use cases, so that could be anything from waste management and pollution monitoring to remote health provision, they start to make sense commercially for the major operators, which have traditionally struggled to see the business case for investing in rural mobile infrastructure in places like ours. So it's this connectivity that's allowing what we've called our stackable use cases that underpin our vision of a digital Dorset, which we created a while back in consultation with our residents and businesses. And this picture here summarises the community's thoughts at a consultation event we ran with local people and organisations a while back. And that's helped to inform Dorset Council's digital vision and the research areas in the 5G Rural Dorset project. So a bit more about our project. It's one of 7 across the UK funded by the government to explore how 5G can be delivered differently in rural areas. So by differently, we mean cheaper, quicker, in novel ways, and even in landscapes as challenging as ours, with its many AONBs and SSSIs and the UNESCO designated World Heritage Coastline. So in having built those networks, and we are reaching that point in our project now, we will explore how rural businesses, communities and public services might use them. So in short, we're helping to create a blueprint for rural 5G across the UK. Importantly for Dorset Council, though, who I work for, we are leading this £8 million R&D project. It's exposing us to some of the world's foremost experts in this field and creating jobs and opportunities for locals, including young people and students, to develop new skills. So how are we going to do this? We'll be testing innovative technical approaches. For example, we've just gone live this week with the world's first real-world standalone private 5G network at 700 megahertz. So that's the long-range frequency that's been used for decades to broadcast TV signals. And this network sits at the heart of our Connected Coast testbed, which I'll be touching on in a minute. We're using existing buildings and infrastructure where possible, such as a redundant mast with power and fibre on Portland, which was built for the Olympics, to provide coverage across the sea to sensitive areas, including Durdle Door, where we wouldn't want to see lattice masts. And we are exploring the pros and cons of what's called neutral hosting, where systems use infrastructure which is shared by multiple network operators. And this could really help close the digital divide in rural areas more quickly and at lower cost. So here's a map of the coverage area, the Dorset Council area, and we aim to deliver 5 test beds with diverse use cases which demonstrate how next generation mobile connectivity can be deployed differently and more cost effectively to provide social and economic opportunities for rural areas. The first of our test beds is called Future of Food. And here we're going to be trialling use cases of 5G on 3 clusters of farms across North and West Dorset to increase productivity and reduce environmental impact. These are the largest 5G agri trials ever undertaken. Some highlights include near Blandford, we're going to be creating the world's first 5G agri robot to map whole fields at a per plant level and zap weeds with bolts of electricity instead of harmful herbicides. Bournemouth University student Matt, who we'll hear from shortly, has been helping buy and implement a range of IoT sensors on our trial farms. In our Connected Cows trial, we're going to be using sensors and artificial intelligence to look after cattle, providing opportunities for students at our local agricultural college to learn from the data produced. And at Portland, we'll be exploring how 5G connected underwater cameras and sensors can help a small Dorset company to improve efficiency in aquaculture practices at a seaweed and shellfish farm. Exeter University students will be creating the algorithms that will take the images from the underwater camera and turn them into useful information for farmers. A 5G indoor and outdoor open testbed has been provided at Dorset Innovation Park near Wool to support collaboration between companies both on and off the site to develop innovative connected products and services. The indoor network is inside the workshop of the MOD's new Defence Innovation Centre and is big enough for autonomous vehicles and connected drones to be tested. The Connected Coast workstream focuses on improving coastal public safety by providing next generation connectivity to life-saving organisations, including the RNLI, which is based in Dorset, and community first responders who work with South West Ambulance Service. Offshore buoys made using natural materials instead of harmful plastics will use 5G to feed digital signs with information about sea state. Footfall monitors will also help landowners and the authorities to manage potential overcrowding at popular spots along the world-famous Jurassic Coast. A public 5G network's been built in the area of the Purbex, which previously had no mobile coverage. And this will allow us to investigate the value to local people of everything from providing home broadband without wires, what's called fixed wireless access, to helping older people stay in their homes longer using assisted living devices connected to the network, which previously didn't exist. And in our most recent project expansion, we'll be using IoT sensors to monitor land movement at Lyme Regis and Burton Bradstock, which is home to the Broadchurch Cliffs, if any of you saw that ITV programme. And we'll be comparing that with data collected in more traditional ways by our engineering team. Using big data and machine learning, we hope to automate some of this work. So that's it. It's a quick skip through. Thanks for listening. There's more information about the project and the various trials on our website, and you can get all the latest news via our social media channels, including Twitter and LinkedIn. With our networks largely in place, we're entering a really exciting phase of the project now, which involves a range of students and young people living and studying in Dorset. So Dave Happy, who is our collaboration lead for our project, is going to explain why we think this is really important before we hear from some of the young people who are engaged in the trials. So over to you, Dave.
Thanks very much indeed, Colin. And as with Colin, same is true with me. I'm obviously not worthy of reflecting my image there because it's not one you'd want to see. The slides are far better. Let me just share with you 6 or so key points. It's the main things that got us to where we are. Well, first of all, I bumped into Colin some years ago, and it led to a collaboration where we co-wrote the bit in the first place. One thing that it's important to share with you all is that it was always envisioned right from inception, right from day one, that we were going to try and do something in this space. The 2 things that we were really insistent on, this was one, and trying to expand the project was the other, and in particular, if we could get into providing additional help right through to areas like adult social care. And believe me, we'll find a way. I had the great good fortune then at one of the DCMS briefings to meet a young lady who you will be hearing from shortly called Daisy Curtis, a postgrad at Exeter University, which is my own alma mater. So I spent a lot of my life whizzing between East Devon and West Dorset and East Devon, so a lot of time at Exeter. Also some friends in Bournemouth, which is another university on the other side of the patch, where you'll be hearing from Matt in due course. And we were really keen to see what we might be able to do. The great thing about Daisy, as you're about to find out, is not only is she highly eloquent, but she's a great asset to us in terms of helping us understand things that some of us oldies certainly couldn't. And after 35 years in telecoms, believe me, I think I am the Victor Meldrew of this project. I think really what we then did was we put together a formal proposal. We went to DCMS and said, look, we're really serious about this. We neither know nor care what other people are doing. Part of the art of being a pioneer is being prepared to take risks like this, which take you out of the comfort zone and aren't part of the formal script. We did so. Where did it get us? Well, I'm delighted to report that DCMS seemed to think it was a really rather good idea. We worked together with Daisy and the necessary universities partnerships to work out what the process would be, acquired the necessary insurance, and Daisy is now attached to my company, Telent Limited. We look after spectrum standards and security, which basically effectively, I hope Daisy would agree, would mean that she has an access all areas pass as far as this project is concerned, with the full support of all of the parties concerned, all of whom were consulted individually. 2 final points, and then you can get on to hearing to the people that matter, and that's Matt, Daisy and Digby, and not me. Clearly, Daisy's providing a report to DCMS on the whole process of collaboration with younger, fresher eyes than we have, and a perspective that we would simply miss. And I think the most important thing of all, and I hope Daisy and others will mention this in due course, is that what we're really aiming to do is to seek to embed the process of skills development for our own young people in all future DCMS projects of this type. If there's an opportunity to help, then it behoves those of us who are old enough to try to add some value and provide some contacts and networking experience to look after our young people. Colin, thank you. Daisy, Matt and Digby, thank you for putting up to me. Here ends the speech from Victor Meldrew.
Thanks very much, Dave. Now just need to introduce the students and young people we've got here with us today. Firstly, Digby Sowerby from Wessex Internet. Do you want to say a couple of words about what you're doing here today, Digby?
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Digby Sowerby, I'm project manager at Wessex Internet, and essentially we're looking after the work package 5 on the 5G project, which is looking into how 5G can benefit agriculture and aquaculture and rural areas on that. And I've worked with Wessex Internet for just over a year now, but I come from an agricultural background. That's me.
Brilliant, thanks Digby. Next up we've got Matt, also from Wessex Internet. Do you want to say a couple of words, Matt?
Yeah, hi, I'm Matt. I'm a master's student at Bournemouth University, currently studying IoT. And I've been working at Wessex Internet on the 5G RuralDorset project, part of like the sensor effort and the more, IoT side of things. But yeah.
Brilliant, thank you, Matt. And by no means last but not least, Daisy Curtis. Hi, Daisy. You're muted, Daisy, sorry.
Typical. I'm Daisy. I'm a PhD student at the University of Exeter. I'm currently undertaking research about 5G, how people make sense and engage with 5G. And as Dave mentioned earlier, I've been undertaking a placement with 5G Rural Dorset over the past 6 months.
Super. Thanks, Daisy. So, Digby, just coming to you first to kick us off, please. What do you think are the opportunities presented by 5G for younger people looking to pursue a career in agriculture, and for the rural communities in general? And could you tell us just a bit about how this work is helping to revolutionise the way agriculture is performed, please?
Yeah, certainly. So I guess I'd start off by saying that really 5G has the opportunity to attract more people to rural areas, which is probably the first thing I'll talk about. And that is very much if we look into agriculture and how 5G can fit into agriculture. If we look at robots, and we look at drones, and we look at sensors, and all these new technologies that are going to come into the agricultural sphere, and which we've seen develop over the past few years, especially, 5G is an enabler for these, and really a combination of these technologies bringing it together needs 5G as it's a communication technology, and so really it brings people with different skills into rural areas, and that leads me on to my second point, which is all about diversity in agriculture. And if we're getting people in who have skills in these new areas, it can only be a benefit to the industry, because we all know as we bring new ideas into rural spaces, that's when we really see change. And really this brings me on to my final point, which is around how 5G can really revolutionize agriculture. As I've just mentioned, 5G is sort of a connector and an enabler for all these technologies. Robotics and drones have been in agriculture for quite some time now, but we've never really seen it kick off. And really, a lot of the reason behind that is because we've not had the communication technologies available in rural areas to do this, and that's a lot what Wessex Internet have worked towards, and a lot what this project is looking at from a wireless perspective. And so really 5G offers the opportunity to bring people in to make agriculture a greener industry, and completely revolutionize the way how we produce food, and how natural spaces in rural areas blend into how we produce food. And I think that's super exciting. And really, it's the combination of both the small robot company who we're working with, Hummingbird Technologies who we're working with, software companies such as FMET Group who we're working with, all coming together, and being able to work together to be able to sort of really drive growth in rural areas, for a much more harmonious ecosystem in rural areas. And I think finally on that point, it's also looking at the quality of life for people in rural areas as well. Tech can be used for good. There's many different ways we can introduce technology into rural areas, and there's no reason why we can't improve our quality of life by using technology in the right way. And I think that's what's exciting, that we're able to have that voice to be able to do that right now and shape it the way we want it to be shaped. There we go.
That's really good. That's really good. Cheers, Digby. Matt, just coming to you next. Your thesis with Bournemouth and with Wessex Internet sounds really interesting. Could you tell us a bit more about your 5G research and how it's helped to enrich your thesis, please?
Yeah, so my thesis part of Bournemouth University was identifying the real-world implications of deploying rural 5G and smart agriculture technologies, not only from a technical standpoint, but also like a business and policy standpoint. And I covered topics such as technological factors, environmental factors, social adoption factors, things along those sort of lines which coincide with it. I also focused on the decision-making processes and the risk considerations by Wessex Internet towards the 5G Rural Dorset project, and the decisions they went through, and eventually decisions they made, and what impacted these. I did this all from the point of view of a rural native SME, which is Wessex Internet, rather than a larger MNO like Vodafone. I think this gave me like a much more of an insight into the ins and outs of the process, as well as the risks and the trade-offs. So in general, the 5G Rural Dorset project, I guess without it, there really wouldn't be a thesis to speak of. I started a placement at West Internet June last year as part of my master's degree, and that sort of naturally matured into a thesis topic around the 5G Rural Dorset and at West Internet. During this time, I worked closely with West Internet and the 5G Rural Dorset project. I was focusing on the devices, all the IoT stuff, the NB-IoT, the LoRa, some I2C stuff, just trying to get all those different sensor systems for the use cases up and running and connected. It gave me the very unique and rare opportunity to study a live and current industry project, working on state-of-the-art technologies and trying to progress this as a group, as opposed to a more sort of study survey-based research project that may have just been using additional research papers to come to conclusions. Yeah, it was a great opportunity to see it all in action in real time as well. So it gave me a real-time glimpse into the company, the things that had to maybe be backtraced, the things that were good ideas, all that process. It allowed me to work personally on the state-of-the-art technologies. So not only was I researching it, but I was also working on it, and it gave me the amazing experience to be able to work on, again, knowledge and experience on these state-of-the-art technologies, which I necessarily wouldn't have been able to have, bearing in mind I'm a master's student. It's usually, reserved for more experienced technical people. So yeah, it's a great project, and glad to be a part of it.
Great, thanks. It's really good to have your involvement in the project and to hear from you there. So Daisy, you've been involved in the project a long time with us. We've got to know you really well. So thinking about 5G and technology research projects like ours, kind of more broadly, how can we be leading diversity and inclusion, and how do you think community and educational engagement can advance this?
So I think to start with, it's necessary to identify why it's important to be thinking about diversity and inclusion in relation to projects like 5G Rural Dorset and the tech sector more broadly. When we're talking and thinking about technologies that can have a real societal impact in such a positive way, it's important that we're engaging with communities and understanding what local communities and society want and need. And the best way to do that is to be engaging with local communities, but also for those people who are working on the technologies to actually be representative of the local communities and of society. A recent report from Tech Nation identified that only about 25% of the tech sector are women, and that has an impact on how tech is developed and how it's designed and deployed. If you have a group of people working on a technology and they are diverse in terms of gender, ethnicity, sexuality, and also if they're neurodiverse, this brings a range of experiences and ideas, which can really make sure that a technology is innovative and that it works not just in theory, but also in practice. So there's the sort of reasons why it's important to be considering these aspects. But in terms of what projects like 5G Rural Dorset can be doing, it's ensuring that they're supporting initiatives which are looking at diversity. So, for example, there's the Women in 5G group, which 5G Rural Dorset has engaged with. And this initiative is looking to empower and support women working in 5G and create a talent pool of these women. Also, as we're talking about skills development, it's important to be thinking about, so there's a current skills gap, a skills shortage within the UK surrounding tech. But whilst we're looking to address this, are there ways in which we can also be thinking about diversity? So if a project goes in and talks to school students, college students, university students, and also those studying at adult learning centres, can they also be thinking about who they're actually engaging with, who they're inspiring? So, for example, going into a school, talking to young girls and saying, actually, tech is this, and maybe this is a way and a future which you might like to pursue. So kind of thinking about those aspects, and then also reflecting upon experiences and the opportunities provided via placements. So as we've heard from Matt, that his placement has really had such a positive impact on his degree, and the same for my placement. But it's important to be thinking about what needs to be in place to enable these placements to happen. So for me, I was lucky enough to have external funding to enable my placement to happen. Some students have their placements actually embedded within their degrees, so it's within their overall course fee. However, other students, that might not be the case, and we need to be thinking about, are there financial barriers that might be stopping certain groups of people from engaging in these opportunities? And I think it would be really great to see projects in the future maybe putting aside a pot of money to ensure that skills development is actually undertaken. So putting aside a pot of money for placements so that students from a range of different socioeconomic backgrounds can engage with these opportunities. I think right now with 5G, because it's a technology that's not just about tech, it's also engaging with a range of different areas. So we've heard about how it can have an impact in the farming sector. It also engages with the health and social care sector, manufacturing, the creative arts sector. And this means that there's a range of opportunities to be engaging and inspiring so many people. And I think projects like 5G RuralDorset have huge potential in addressing the skills shortage, but also with incorporating diversity work at the same time. And it's a really exciting future at the moment, I think.
That's awesome, Daisy. Thanks. Yeah, some really important points there, particularly about community engagement. Is there anything else that you guys want to bring to this before we turn the session over to our audience at all? No.
No.
So, yeah, so it's your turn now, audience. If you've got any questions for the panel, either feel free to post them in the chat or wave your hand on the raise hand feature, or just unmute and speak if you'd like to. But yeah, try and catch them out because that's what they're there for. So first question up from Nick Wells. What did you find was the best way of engaging with Dorset farmers and growers to build their understanding of IoT technology, and how are the team supporting them in the adoption and benefits realisation? That's probably a Digby question.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we started off very much so. Our Wessex Internet, the company we're working for, is originally based out of a farming organisation. So we're a farm on our roots, and so we have loads of connections around Dorset and have a really good staple into the Dorset farm world. And so from that, we were able to build loads of connections into people who might be interested to join the trials. Additionally, we did a lot of stakeholder engagement early on. So I think we engaged about 90 different agricultural stakeholders from across the UK there. But in terms of how we found those farmers, so there's a complete range of farmers and a range of attitudes towards technology from farmers. I think there's definitely shared aggravations with technologies across the board, and we decided those quite early on to be reliability. So firstly, the reliability of technology, so farmers spend ages playing about with technology and it doesn't work. Part of the reason for that is interoperability, which is different technologies working together, which is something else we're really trying to focus on in the trials. And then finally, we've got affordability, which is a massive issue in rural areas and is a massive issue we see as a company when we're trying to provide digital connectivity. But also with 5G, again, it's going to be a big barrier there. And so we're trying to see what ways we can innovatively break down those barriers to farmers and rural people and ensure that there is value right across the chain. And so it's the continued engagement from the 4 farmers that we're dealing with within the trials that keeps that farmer voice in there. And we do need to try harder than we are to keep those voices heard and hear more about them and spread the word as well. And that is something we are planning to do as the trials continue and beyond the end of the trials. Long-winded from me as usual.
No, that's good, Digby. Colin or Tim, do you want to add anything from a legacy point of view from the council? Because I know we're tracking benefits realisation and things quite closely. Is there anything you guys want to add?
The only thing I'd add really is that the trials were grounded in community engagement. So the research areas that we chose were essentially dictated, if you like, by a series of consultation events we held before we even made the bid. So we wanted to understand where the opportunities were for local communities, and the farming community engaged in those workshops very, very strongly, and that's why we chose to take forward Agri as one of our major test beds. So yeah, in a way, we didn't have to bring the farming community kicking and streaming to the table. They were there and they wanted to be part of it. So that's all I would say. I don't know if Tim's got any observations.
I would just add that I've been struck, not coming from farming backgrounds, of how willing farmers are to adopt new technologies and how precarious their existences are, and the need to make sure that we don't provide them with a solution looking for a problem, but we start with their problems. So yeah, I think the work that Digby's been doing has been firmly rooted in understanding the pain points of the farmers and then finding solutions that will address them.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone. Got a question here from Carl. In terms of digital inclusion, the cost of data is clearly a big problem. Has there been any discussion about a social tariff, for instance, as I imagine new, in brackets 5G, usually equals expensive? So there's a few people who feel that one. Maybe that's a council one, possibly Daisy, if you've got some inclusion experience there.
I think this is best to kind of throw open to the council.
Yeah, that's why I went there first.
I was going to pass it to Dave. Sorry. Yeah, no is the answer. We haven't had any discussions about a social tariff, but the only thing I would focus on here is, yeah, obviously, in an individual level, cost can be a barrier. Just speaking personally, you know, having a 5G phone in the house, not mine, the 5G data doesn't cost any more. It's part, you know, we haven't had to take a new SIM or anything like that, enter a new contract. But what I would focus on is the opportunities that 5G presents to deliver services to people who perhaps don't really care how those services arrive. So the connectivity that 5G could enable, and keeping people in their homes longer, using IoT devices, etc. There's a real opportunity to reduce the cost to the public purse of delivering services in new and disruptive ways like that. So that's one thing I would focus on in terms of the efficiencies that can be achieved by using 5G. But Dave, I don't know if you've got anything to say on cost of data, which I know is falling. So.
Yeah, actually, I have got a couple of things to say, and I make no apology for the great clash backdrop to my screen. I prefer that one. Just to say, really, Carl, not only is it a great question, but what you've done is you've struck part of the nail on the head. One of the reasons why the programme was set up and DCMS was so keen to fund it was to try to find ways to get more social inclusion and to try to close the digital divide. The facts are the facts. When we actually buy these services, so if you go to Wessex Internet or BT or whomever to get a service, you're still paying normally a flat rate fee. Now, back in my day, however long ago that was, it was all distance related. Now, the facts are that distance is still a key factor in all of this, and we haven't got to the end of resolving how it's going to pan out. What I'd say is this. Two things. One, if you can stack lots of use cases atop one another, means that you fit, say, one mast at Digby's farm over at Ewan Minster, and as a result of doing something where you put up a tower to look after agricultural monitoring, where you've got automated robots, you can put another piece of equipment up that faces in the opposite direction and might serve the local school, for example. That's a great way to try to bring costs down. And the other thing is that I think government will take a more active role in this. We've always had something called a universal service obligation. This was mandated by government and regulator to keep control of prices of ordinary landline calls. That's now been morphed into the broadband service obligation. And what you'll always find is that's always too small for what you want to do, especially if you're that bit younger and you're into your gaming and what have you. What I would say is this, a final thing, over time, I believe the prices will eventually begin to fall. And this will be as a function of the fact that within a 5G world, the network hardware, the boxes that make it all work, can be separated from the software. Now, that means it's possible to reduce the costs for the operators who are providing the services, and therefore I think the trend will be down. And if that's too technical, by all means, question me offline. I'm sure James can connect us up as necessary. Back to you, James.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Dave.
I can also pitch in there quickly, James, as well. I realise probably not, but from Wessex Internet, putting my Wessex Internet hat on, so we're fibre providers in rural areas. There's something called the UK Gigabit Batch Scheme now, which essentially subsidises getting fibre to rural properties, and this is maybe something that we could see similarly done in 5G as another example of a social tariff of some sort that we put in place.
Yeah, that actually came up in the recent digital workshop that we did with the wider council as well, that we provide fibre voucher schemes, so why not voucher schemes for other things?
5G, exactly.
Yeah, got a nice question, a typically Gary question here. What could we do, if anything, to make young people like yourselves feel more valued and involved in projects like this? Oh. Anyone want to field that?
I'll start as I'm relatively vague. I think the examples of Daisy, Matt, and myself being sort of very much we feel very. I speak for myself, but I think for all of us, we feel quite valued and a key part of it. And I think that's the key, really, giving us a little bit of responsibility, and then not worrying about the few mistakes that we make, which we do as always, and realize that's a learning curve, and understanding what we can bring to that. So I think it's just valuing responsibility. Definitely two things for me.
Daisy,
Yeah,
Matt,
just to echo what Digby said, I think it's the valuing and engaging with us. So that there's a lot for us to learn, but also we kind of bring in different perspectives. And I think the thing that I've really found is that my perspective has been valued when I've been kind of having discussions with Dave and the wider project. And also, like Dave mentioned within his slide, it's having access to a range of areas. I think if we only had access to maybe one or two things, we'd feel quite stilted. But the fact that there's always opportunity to explore and be challenged and to grow our own skill set, I think has been really valuable.
Very good.
Yeah, I agree. Just to echo those two as well. Like I feel, very privileged to have this, and there's no point during the project, either by Western or Bournemouth University, did I feel like stuck or undervalued. Yeah, my opinion and my work's always been valued throughout the entire process.
Brilliant, thanks, Matt. Yeah, I mean, all of your input is incredibly valuable. We've always acknowledged that, I think, and particularly Daisy, when I'm desperate for content, I can always rely on you to produce me something. I've got a note from Tim in the chat, actually. Ownership of data clarity. Was there something you wanted to say around that, Tim, or was that a note to Digby?
Yeah, there's definitely something I can say on it. Shall I go? I'll go again.
Yeah,
So
I was just looking to prompt you, Digby, so carry on.
Yeah, so I think again, one of the things that's come up when we've been developing our use cases was who owns the data, and there are a range of different organisations that we've spoken to, and I think there's even a small piece being done as part of this project, looking at how data should be transferred between parties. So a big issue at the moment in agriculture is some of the big machinery owners or the big chemical companies. They're very much data silos, and so these big companies can sort of essentially block farmers in by owning the data and making sure that data is not interoperable, being able to be transferred between different systems. And that's a massive blocker we've got at the moment, and I think it's a massive issue within the industry generally. But that's definitely one thing we really want to focus on, and also farmers are having to pay thousands of pounds, tens of thousands of pounds just to get access to that data from these big companies. So how can we shift that balance so that farmers are able to extract value from their data, and have ownership of that data? So thank you, Tim, for that, because I think it's a really important point as well.
And Dave points out as well, the other side of the coin is data protection, vital role of cybersecurity, where the youth is leading the way in protecting the networks. So yeah, absolutely, good point. Just scanning back up the chat, I don't think I've missed any questions there. I can see some swapping of email addresses going on, which is really good. Anybody else have any questions for the panel, or any of the council team for that matter? In which case then I'll just leave for me to thank everybody for attending today. Thank you to the panel for your time. It was a really interesting and engaging conversation, I thought. So that's gone down really well. The video will be available after the chat for anybody that arrived after the start, and we look forward to seeing you all really soon. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Cheers.
Thank you all. Bye.
Nothing you mean? You still here, Shane?
Yeah. Are you? I can't stop the recording. I've realised until everybody vacates.
I'm just going. Sorry, I was just multitasking.
Sorry.
I'm going now. Bye.
See ya.